this out, some latte art I can actually be proud of. Welcome back to another episode of Reacting to Crash Videos. I don't want to waste any time, I want to get straight into it, but I do have to say, YouTube has been brutal on the demonetization recently, especially with all the base jumping and reacting to crashes that I do on this channel. So I have to put in a disclaimer. For YouTube, this video is done in an instructional, educational manner. We're not showing deaths, we're not showing blood and guts. We're breaking down some paramotor accidents and trying to learn from them. Let's get into it. As always, I'm going to start out with the most mild. Today we have 4 crashes. We're going to work up to the more extreme ones at the end. First up, this clip was sent to me by my man Russ. This is actually a paragliding clip with a tree landing. Let's take a look.
I probably shouldn't have said that.
So what exactly went wrong here? Russ describes that he was paragliding from a mountain peak. He got a lot more altitude than he really wanted to, and he decided to spiral down to kill some altitude. But in doing so, he didn't realize his wind drift as he spiraled pushed him back behind the peak of the mountain, which, if you're aware, that's where the rotor monsters hide. Rotor is basically the turbulence caused by the airflow going over an object, then breaking up and getting turbulent on the backside. Similar to if you looked at a rock in a river. On the backside, there's all that turbulent white water. That's where Russ ended up while he was paragliding and quickly realized he had made a mistake. But instead of flying away from the mountain going downwind, he kind of hugged close to the mountain and got rocked by some massive turbulence. A few things to witness here. Russ was not wearing a helmet, which obviously wasn't the wisest choice. And second, if you look closely, you can see power lines that he came pretty close to hitting. The third thing to observe is Russ's hand positioning. He's obviously flown into some bad conditions, and I actually discussed this in the last video I posted, talking about how to fly in turbulence. I talked about active piloting and engaging the brakes to keep the glider inflated. But in this case, you can actually see Russ is kind of holding onto his riser, which means he's not really doing much with the brake, he's just gripping the riser. He takes that big asymmetric deflation on the right-hand side, and that actually cascades into another collapse. As the glider reinflates so violently, it surges forward and then does another full frontal. Luckily, after this second cycle, the glider reinflates, but he's too low and ends up in the trees. I think Russ's response here is pretty fantastic. He's just so casual about it, like this is something that happens to him every day. Luckily, he said it took about an hour to get all the gear down, but he was unharmed, unscratched, uninjured, and so was his glider. Russ, you're a legend. Thank you for sending this one over. All right, next up we have a motor out situation by my man Austin Flagg. He was flying a free ride 16 meter, which is like my all-time favorite glider, and he was flying around a motocross event and had an engine failure. So what exactly happened here? A little context, the area that Austin is flying in is littered with trees. It's basically a forest with an opening where we see this dirt bike track, and that's pretty much the only available spot to land. Now we always talk about trying to have an area to land if you have a motor out because they do happen, And in this case, Austin was flying with the smallest room for air, which is something I do often. But if you're putting yourself in that situation, you have to know that you can nail the landing, and that's exactly what Austin did here. So he's flying around this dirt bike event, and his goggles came loose somehow, worked its way through the netting, and exploded his propeller. So that means instant loss of thrust. In this case, it took off one blade, which caused a massive amount of vibrations on a 3-blade prop, rendering his power supply useless. Luckily, Austin is a gangster here and nailed the spot landing. He didn't have much time to react, and he didn't have much room to work with or altitude to work with. So he cuts it in over a tree, kicks the one tree, and this free ride is a very efficient fast glider, so he swoops it all the way across the entire field, uses up every inch of room, and gets it stopped, just getting hung up in the trees on the other side. Luckily, once again in this situation, Austin was uninjured, his glider was totally fine, and the only damage was to his motor, which was caused by those goggles going through the prop. I think he broke a spar, but pretty minor stuff considering. This was just a really good example of having a spot to land with a really small margin for error, but then absolutely nailing it when you have to. All right, these next two clips were emailed to me by Alex Goncalves. I hope I said that right. And I don't have a whole lot of context from these two incidents, but they are from Brazil. This first one is a pretty gnarly midair collision. All right, so let's break it down. What we have here is obviously two pilots that were potentially distracted, not paying enough attention, and collided in the sky. Obviously, the pilot here filming was using his phone, maybe for some navigation or something like that. And he realizes at the last minute that the other pilot is on a collision course with him, tries to respond, but he just doesn't have enough time to avoid the collision. But what happens after that is the best response by both pilots. This happened at a pretty low altitude, but both pilots don't hesitate, and both pilots get the reserves out really quickly. It is just a tangled mess, but at least they've got two reserves open and out as they're coming down. I don't know why people don't fly with reserves still. There's so many reasons to fly with them. Some people say they're never flying high enough, but I mean, in this scenario, they weren't that high and both of them got the reserves out quick. I think this is something a lot of people don't think about, is normally people think about turbulence-induced collapses or equipment failure, but if you're sharing the sky with even one other pilot, there's a chance that you might have a collision, and that's reason enough to carry a reserve. Like I said, I really don't have a lot more context on this video. I'm not sure if either pilot was injured or not. I hope they weren't. It looked like they came down pretty smooth with both of those reserves out, so hopefully they're both good. Now on to our fourth and final video. This one is honestly the most gnarly, and it's a little bit hard to watch, just for warning you, but the good side is the pilot actually walked away from this, so even though it looks really gnarly, he walked away. Let's take a look.
Isso que é bonito, ó. Muito bonito, Gisele.
Tira o barco da água. Fechou. Fechou. Aí, joga o reserva, joga o reserva, joga o reserva. Controla o giro. Joga o reserva, joga o reserva. Joga o reserva, joga o reserva.
So from what I understand, this happened in Brazil and it was a safety training course over water, kind of like an SIV or an advanced maneuvering course. The course was over for the day and this pilot decided to go up and practice some more maneuvers. We've seen this exact type of scenario in a few of the prior episodes of Reacting to Crashes. Basically, a wing over gone wrong. And in this case, much like the other cases, it's just a matter of a lack of outside pressure. When you're rolling into a wing over, you get to a point of intensity where you have to hold outside pressure, which is counterintuitive, but that outside pressure is what keeps the outside side of the glider inflated. If you work up your wing overs bigger and bigger and you're just toggle monkeying, doing one side, eventually the outside is going to collapse like we saw here. A lot of times you get lucky and it just collapses and reinflates before you can even really realize anything happened. But sometimes you get unlucky, and in this case, the glider got stuck in a cravat, which means the fabric basically got caught up in the lines and the glider wasn't reinflating, and that caused a spiral. It starts off almost like a sat, which means the pilot's body is going backwards, the glider's going forward, and the rate of descent is relatively slow. But at the last minute, that sat kind of turns more into a flat spiral, which is the worst possible scenario because that means your rate of descent is at the highest rate possible. And that's right when he impacts the water. What could he have done differently? First off, he could have been a lot higher to be practicing these maneuvers. Second, holding outside pressure to prevent the collapse. Third, it's possible that he could have tried to get out of this spiral by getting that cravat out, pumping the brake, yanking a Stabilo line, something like that to clear the malfunction, but that's only if he was high enough. At the altitude he was at, it probably would have just been better to toss a reserve. I'm unsure if he had a reserve or not. Now, like I mentioned, I don't have a ton of other context around this scenario, but there is a YouTube channel called My Dog is Choking, which I'll link in the description. He was present when this happened, and he has a lot better breakdown of the list of injuries, which were pretty intense. He actually has footage of the pilot getting off the boat and walking away, but he's pretty hurt. He goes to the hospital and then has a list of injuries. So if you want to see that video, I'll have that linked in the description as well. So those are the 4 videos I have today. I hope you guys enjoyed and maybe learned a little thing or two. Always good to keep these incidents in the back of your mind when you're out there flying to try to stay safer. Outside of that, I've got my new Risky Biscuits Co. t-shirt on. Updates on the 4-stroke motor. It's getting finalized. It's going to be shipped to Florida and then to me. So I'm expecting it within the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's going to be our giveaway motor, the EOS Quattro. Then I'm going to be launching the new designs. It's going to be awesome. I'm super excited for it. So stay tuned. I'm going to be giving updates as soon as I get it in my hands. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at @TuckerGott. And obviously I'll be posting all over on YouTube. Till the next one, have fun, fly safe, peace. Bzzz.